blogosphere and social network about shooting at the Lubyanka, after Putin imitated a press conference, and actually held a New Year's Eve void session. And really, what to tell the country? Why say anything at all? Everything was clear without words. We all go to Putin's hell together under a bright sign and a deceptive name, paradise, and everything has long been decided for us. The right without the right, and the security for which one must sacrifice personal freedom. Everything is decided. Putin's Russia has a different perspective. And now, confirming the said phrase of Winston Churchill, the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists, and in the presence of another, second Hitler. Another arson of the Reichstag occurred before our eyes. We have a Reichstag arsonist, or rather, a new shooter. Lubyansky. Shooting near the FSB building in the center of Moscow occurred on the evening of December 19. Initially, it was reported that she was arranged by 3 people. Then it was stated that the shooter was alone. It is reported that this is a certain Evgeny Manurov, who worked in several private security companies. As a result of the attack, an FSB officer was killed and 4 other special services were injured. The attacker himself was eliminated. The incident occurred on the eve of Checkers Day. Daniel Konstantinov. In these dark days, I want to tell you to be careful. Be careful with the posts and comments. Shooting. Emotions, but no one cancelled the article to justify terrorism. Be careful and don't bring yourself under the article. Don't make life easier for those who build a career on anti-extremist statistics. Everything is like in Victor Choi's song, Watch Yourself. Be careful. Watch yourself. Telegram channel. Sir Pampo. Yesterday's armed attack on the Lubyanka, committed directly during Putin's speech at a concert at the State Duma on the eve of State Security Officers' Day, can have a number of serious consequences. One must think that the president is furious and just will not leave the provocation unanswered. The country froze in suspense. What exactly will the authorities bomb in response, this time as an alternative to Voronezh, telegrams, YouTube, rallies, dissent, eco-activists, foreign agents, the Constitution? Or maybe just Capitol Hill, the Syrian desert, the scorched fields of Donbass, the mountain peaks of the North Caucasus, the underwater depths at the borders of the continental shelf? How many additional yards will the poor security officials fill in, tearing another piece from snickering doctors, teachers, culture, science and the economy? And, most importantly, what other order will be awarded after the incident? FSB Director Bortnikov or Interior Minister Kolokoltsev? Elmarid, after yesterday's shooting at Lubyanka, our power structures will obviously have a fascinating round of general dumping and sweeping everyone with everyone. Considering the power structures in Russia are large and feed areas are shrinking, the fuss will squeeze competitors from bread places. The lone shooter, directly our domestic Lee Harvey Oswald, turned out to be not entirely successful and not quite sane security guard of the private security company. And he wandered his whole working life from one security company to another. He had rifle training and a hunting rifle, but did not have combat training. Therefore, he shot quite qualitatively. But he fought as an ordinary amateur, without having the slightest idea about the elementary tactics of battle in urban conditions, the main rule in which is, movement is life. Whether he had accomplices is still an unclear question, as eyewitnesses speak of shooting from different directions, although, of course, in the dump that happened yesterday, the rushing Siloviki could be mistaken for terrorists. It's not clear that a large number of wounded and killed are entirely the merit of the shooter or the liquidators who fought with him helped to him, scorching everything that stirs. The mess was apparently noble yesterday. It is terrible to imagine if a group of trained militants would attack Lubyanka, with such an organization of service and protection of strategic facilities in the very center of the empire. Such a group could accidentally capture the Kremlin, not like Lubyanka. By the way, just in case, in order not to spoil the statistics, the incident is now qualified as an encroachment on the lives of employees, but not as a terrorist attack. After all, we have no terrorist attacks. At the far approaches, everyone was exhausted. Everyone is quite happy with the lone psycho version, although witness testimonies from friends of the shooter are already appearing, which speak of some kind of connections with some Arabs and all that. Now whoever wins the Siloviki's war around this sad incident will formulate the final version of what happened, Igor said of. What is important in all this yesterday's press conference is that it didn't become news number one. Pure psychology. Here's a press conference. Here's commentators quickly commenting on something, changing the constitution, terms in a row. But, Blaise Compaoré's case, there was such a figure in Burkina Faso. Changed the constitution, and again. Was re-elected, floated away, by the way, and then, all the attention on the emergency. And the press conference isn't the main thing. Vladimir Krasilnikov. I immediately remembered the events on Manezhnaya Square in Moscow. Then the Russian team lost, and ostensibly those who came to watch it at Manezhnaya Square caused riots that led to human casualties. There was also a stage play that became the reason for the start of winding up political rights and freedoms, something I, with the latest news from the Lubyanka, immediately remembered the arson of the Reichstag, writes Yegor Urshov. Telegram channel, Master of Pen. Yesterday's attack on the Lubyanka took place against the backdrop of incessant signals about the forced mining of various social facilities in Moscow. Yesterday, more than 170,000 people were evacuated due to these threats. For several days in a row, the work of the metro, shopping centers, and other crowded objects has been feverish. Add to this picture the doctrine of Internet sovereignty outlined recently, and you get an almost complete image of a new model of the existence of the system in mobilization conditions. There was talk of a possible reshuffle in the security services in connection with a missed strike from a terrorist. However, hardly such a symbolic event, on the day of the president's press conference and during the ceremonies on the occasion of the KGB Day, can become a trigger for high resignations. This would mean making personnel decisions under the pressure of circumstances that are not practiced on the Russian Olympus. On the contrary, in such an environment, the positions of the leadership of law enforcement agencies remain unshakable and strengthened. But new options for security officials are quite possible. There are enough arguments to tighten the nuts. Kirill Shulika, Evgeny Manurov, who attacked the FSB, became the prize winner of the DOSAAF shooting competition in Moscow less than a month ago. Telegram channel Baza. Since the beginning of the 2000s, Evgeny Manurov has worked in several private security companies. The most interesting of them, Vimpel Reserve, acted as the founder of the Association of Veterans and Intelligence Officers. In the 1990s, one of its former owners was a prominent security official, the leader of the Vimpel Group. Now this is the department, in FSB. Alexander Kovalenko. The attack on the FSB reception center in Moscow on December 19 is beginning to grow into interesting details. So, if after the first shots rang out on the Kuznetskaya Bridge, many began to wonder who dared to attack the Holy of Holies of the FSB saints, giving preference to ISIS, then to Caucasians, with periodic phantasmagoric references to the right sector. According to the results of today, everything has not only become clear, but also raised even more questions. Paradox? No. the realities of the uncontrolled processes taking place in the deep subskin of the Russian security forces, which are more and more like chaos gaining momentum. For example, if the identity of the Lubyankovsky shooter is already more or less clear, namely, he turned out to be a resident of the Moscow region, Yevgeny Manurov, then his occupation is not so clear. To date, it is definitely known that the Lubyankovsky shooter has worked in a number of private security agencies since the beginning of the 2000s, and one of them has a direct relationship with the special structure into which entry was ordered for mere mortals. We are talking about the private security company Vimpel Reserve, which deals not only with security in very specific functions, for example, participating in raider attacks, as was the case with the beach in Serebryany Bor, which was expropriated by Vasyl Lekperov, president of Lukoil, but also has a direct bearing on the Veteran Association, which includes employees of Special Forces Vimpel Union. In addition to all other versions of the investigation, among which there is the ubiquitous ISIS, investigators do not exclude a possible conflict between Yevgeny Manurov and any member of the Veteran Association. And in this context, I am more than sure that attention should be paid to the following events that occurred before the December 19th attack. In particular, not so long ago, information surfaced that a Russian arrested in Germany on charges of murdering a citizen of Georgia's Elymkhan-Khangoshvili, Vadim Krasikov, also served in the FSB Vimpel Special Forces in the past and took part in at least one more contract killing. But here one should take into account the fact that Krasikov, according to preliminary data, was nevertheless a freelancer at the side job of the GRU, rather than the current Vimpel personnel officer. The second very important point for a more detailed background to the events, I consider the recognition by the Investigative Committee of the Krasnodar Territory PMC, ENOT Corp. by a criminal organization with indictment of one of the leaders of this organized criminal group, the personnel officer of the GRU, of the Ministry of Defense Denis Karaban. And a small but very important point, not just to complete the picture, but also to complement the psychological and worldview portrait of Manurov. According to the mother of the Lubyankovsky shooter, he hated the KGB, read the FSB. And, obviously, he had good reason for that, since, following the outcome of the events, he went on such a daring and suicidal act. Or, to be more categorical in their statements, who exactly pushed him to commit this act? Indeed, the story of the suicidal hero is hard to believe, and taking into account the bar on which he swung, the goal was clearly chosen purposefully and not spontaneously. Given the fact that ISIS cells are still silent, suspicions are already falling on the domestic players of the Russian canister with spiders.